We're back to the Neil Haley Show, and I'm excited about this conversation because in a lot of ways, I'm going to take this middle ground in this conversation. Definitely not going to take the conservative route or the left route in this way, because my belief system as a journalist is I have to take it down the middle, especially as a business owner. I always remember the saying that Michael Jordan said in his documentary: Republicans buy tennis shoes as well, where he didn't want to always be an activist. He believed in all of his fans. And this is really kind of relates a lot to our guest. So I'm excited to welcome Ben Rekhi. He's the director of the Reunited States. How are you? I tell you what, it's excited to have you on the show. Thanks.
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Neil.
Now, Ben, let's talk about your background first. You've been in a lot of interesting stuff as a director before this project, and I'm always interested when you come on the Neil Haley Show to kind of tell more who you are before we get into the film.
Sure. Yeah. My name's Ben. I grew up in Northern California. My dad is an immigrant from India, and my mom is a blonde-haired, blue-eyed American from the East Coast. So I grew up going to temple on one weekend and church the next weekend, which really helped me sort of look at, two different points of view at the same time, which led to being able to make this film. But my previous films, I started working in the film industry. I went to NYU for film school, and then worked with the Coen brothers on a film that they directed called Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? In the camera department. That was sort of my first foot in the door in the industry. Got hired by George Clooney to shoot the behind the scenes for the first film that he directed, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind. And then started producing independent films. I did a film that I produced called Bomb the System that was about graffiti writers in New York. Directed a film called Waterborne about a water shortage in Los Angeles. And then eventually went on to do a couple of bigger movies, a film called The Ashram with the Academy Award winner Melissa Leo. That was sort of a spiritual thriller set in India. And Watch List, which is a film set in the drug wars in the Philippines about Duterte, the president there, his war on drugs. And so, since then I've really looked at using cinema as a means to allow people to walk in others' shoes and see the world from other people's points of views. I think it's an incredibly powerful medium. And that's sort of what brought me to the idea for this film, for the Reunited States.
And see, I think that you want something that's going to, and it looks like you as a director or a producer, you say to yourself, I want to be involved in projects that are really going to make a difference and resonate as art, versus just doing art for entertainment wise. You want it to be entertaining, but also something that you can bring home and learn more from. Sounds like you're, and bringing certain awareness that might not always be on the screens.
That's right. I mean, I think there's room for it all. Like, I like a big popcorn movie.
Yeah, exactly.
The next person, but for me personally, these things take a long time, and 2 years of your life, and it ends up being 90 minutes or 2 hours of other people's time. And so, I really realized that I feel most fulfilled doing projects that can change the way people see the world or see themselves. And cinema is a mix of a lot of different mediums. It's literature, theater, photography, music, performance, and all rolled into one. And it really allows you to be a fly on the wall for the human experience. And it can show us what we have in common, and the common humanity that we share. And so for me, it's first and foremost, you have to entertain. If people feel like they're being lectured to, they're out the door immediately. So I really look for stories that are emotional and powerful, but then above that, is there a way to take a preconception and kind of look at it in a new way, because that can be transformative for an audience.
It could definitely. So how did you get involved in Reunited States?
So the Reunited States, I had initially done mostly fictional films, and after the 2016 election, realized that maybe there was a way to turn the camera around on what was happening and to help navigate this new reality that we found ourselves in. And I did a series called The Hidden Vote for PBS that profiled minorities who support Trump. And so we did an episode on Muslims for Trump and LGBT for Trump. and really challenge some of the preconceptions of, who his base were, and to kind of show that this was not as simple a phenomenon. There's a lot more complexity in the American electorate, and as a way to see and hear people, to understand, different points of view. And through that series, I came to realize that cinema was a powerful platform for us to hear each other better. And The Reunited States was a title that popped into my head, and I thought it was actually too clever and that someone else must have already had it. And so I Googled it, and there was a book of the same name on the same topic by Mark Gerzon, who had been doing this work for 30 years. And so I called him up and I said, look, I'd love to adapt your book and, meet some of the people that are doing this kind of bridge building work now, like who's on their feet traveling the country, trying to bring us together. And so he introduced me to three of the storylines. But the initial storyline, Susan Bro, who, was the woman in Charlottesville who lost her daughter when the car drove through the crowd. I was really struck. I saw her speak at a live event when I was in DC, and I was really struck by the fact that she had, suffered this terrible tragedy, but was able to come out the other side talking about the need to have difficult discussion to move past where we were and to avoid further violence. And I was so moved, I went and spoke to her and I said, listen, I don't know how or why, but I really feel like I want to be a part of telling your story because I think it can help people right now. A lot of people are emotional
Exactly.
or excited or confused. And she, kind of vetted me and said, what are your intentions? What are you trying to do and say? And I said, I really just want to, bring people together and show that there are ways that we can see and hear each other better. And so she signed on, and that sort of kicked things off.
See, that's really cool. And thinking about looking at the book and then putting the relationship, finding her, that's just got to be forgiveness is something really big in this. I mean, to forgive somebody that did this. And then your idea is you want to reunite not just one side of the aisle, but the other side. So you had to find somebody else on that other side of the aisle, right? As well.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You touched on a really big point there about forgiveness. It's really caustic to oneself to carry around anger and hate and fear. Even though we think we might be fighting for what we believe in, it's actually harmful to us to carry so much hate around. And so it's in our own self-interest to let that go. And so it was important that we had people from all across the political spectrum, left, right, and center, and Democrat, Republican, and Independent. And so Susan, she's left leaning, and she'd be the first to say, like, she grew up in a conservative family and was sort of unawares to some of the injustices that exist for different communities out there, and that this really opened her eyes because her daughter, ended up dying for marching for, social justice. And so it thrust her into this world unexpectedly. And then there was another story in the film of a Republican family, the Levertons, who were from Dallas, Texas, who, David's story is so interesting. He was a advisor to a senator, to a Republican senator, and kind of left politics, and he and his wife had a daughter that was born with Down syndrome. And it really flipped their world upside down in terms of what was important and what they valued, and what other people judged them because of a daughter with a disability. And it sort of like, flipped his world on his head. And he was really struggling with what the next steps in life were. And his wife said, look, if you didn't have a mortgage and we didn't have kids, what would you want to do starting tomorrow? And without thinking, he'd said, I want to bring unity back to this country. I was part of a mechanism that divided this country through political campaigns, and I want to repair some of that damage. And so eventually, they decided to sell their house, buy an RV, and travel to all 50 states to find out what's tearing us apart. And their journey on this year on the road is just really transformative. They go into native reservations and border towns and Black communities and really understand that there are many different versions of America out there, depending on, what you look like, how much money you make, what gender you are, what religion you follow. And that's the beauty of this country, but that's also the thing that we have to work through and appreciate, is working through our differences, in order for democracy to succeed.
And there's so much hatred on both sides. And when you made this film, it was before the real divide happened the last couple of years, right? So explain that. So you're in this process of making this film, and you've seen things just turn upside down till then, which means this film means more and more to everyone that are going to view it now.
Yeah. Yeah, we made it starting in 2018, and we finished at the end of 2020. And before this last election, I think that these divides have been there and have been growing over the past 20 to 30 years.
Yes.
But they really reached a fever pitch in the past couple of years, and really in the past, 2 years. And so we started at a time when the divisions were front and center, but we never could have imagined how much they would grow. And we really wanted this film to be evergreen and kind of talk to the deeper divisions in the country, not just the present ones with whoever's in power at the time. And, really to not go into policy as much as humanity, and,
Right.
what are the kind of things that connect us as people. And those things are timeless. And so we hope that the film, and we're hearing that it feels as relevant now as it did when we started it a couple of years ago.
Now, looking at what you're talking about with the film and the divide that's happening, I think the hardest part is, why don't you look at the other side? That's what this film is about. Let's look at what the other side, are they really that different from us? Are they really that different that I can't stand that person and can't stomach that person? Like we have people, Ben, that we just can't stomach because they're not good people, or we just don't like them. It's not because of what they like, things like that. We just don't get along. There's just not either there's animosity between us, but it's not based on a specific stance. So I think there's a lot of people have to understand, if you were going and you broke down and you went to someone's house and had coffee or had a dinner with somebody, how you'd see that we're so much similar than we feel. And through this radio show and TV show in 11 years, I've interviewed people on both sides of the aisle constantly. And really, there's no difference at all, except certain preconceived notions that make people hate each other. For example, oh, you're anti-God because you're an abortionist. You're into abortion, or because you're pro-life, you're not into women's choice, or you don't like helping the poor, so you're a racist. So all these different things go back and forth. Hey, you can't believe in God if there's same-sex marriage. These kind of preconceived notions that I couldn't get along with that person, like that person, just based on the ideology, and not understanding we're all just trying to get along in life, to help others and do good things, and neither side is wrong. How can we bridge that gap so that we can reunite people, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit more in this interview, after who you brought on as executive producers, and then also some of the big events coming up.
Yeah, well, you hit it on the head. I think that we're also trained to look at life in binary terms. Like, either you're for this, that means you're against that. And, as we all know, the world isn't black and white. It's there's various shades of gray. And, a lot of this way of thinking has been put into place by systems and organizations that benefit from it. I mean, the three major influences of our worldview are, our news sources, which benefit from partisanship because it sells advertising. And so we're probably getting a distorted view of what's actually happening, because we're seeing the extreme 10% of activists or extremists on either side constantly, and we're over amplifying that because it triggers our fear mechanism that keeps us watching. And so there's a very robust system of news media that is overemphasizing the most extreme voices. Social media does the same thing with algorithms, and it's kind of like warping our view. And then even political parties, like both political parties have realized that you're much more likely to go vote out of fear or anger than out of reconciliation or hope. And so, when you have these three forces weighing down on us every day, you have to realize that their incentive isn't aligned with our best interests a lot of the time. Like, our goal is to get informed information that can make an objective like view to live a peaceful existence with each other. Their goal is to win elections or to sell advertising, and so immediately there's a disalignment of interest there. And so with us, there's several issues that divide us. There's probably 4 or 5 really hot button issues that we won't agree on ever, and there's thousands of issues that we do agree on. And so the idea that, if you're for this, then you're against this. And also, like you said, the preconceived notion that I'm dehumanizing someone based on not even having ever met them, just by what I've formed because of these three
Yes,
sort of media sources. And dehumanization is much different than disagreeing. I may disagree with, someone about a policy issue, but dehumanization means you're beneath me, you're not worthy of my time, you're not worth saving, and you're not part of this country, and you're damaging it. And that's a very dangerous road, because dehumanization usually precedes violence. And so
mhm,
with the road that we're on, it doesn't look good unless we start taking ownership for ourselves in our own lives with our friends and neighbors.
exactly. And so you got Megan McCain on board and also Van Jones, which is such a interesting as executive producers. So how'd that happen? How'd they hear about it and say, I want to be part of this?
Yeah, it's been great having Van and Megan on board, because they've brought a lot of attention to the project. They're also quite aware of their own, polarizing tendencies or electric statements that sometimes, go viral. It was really important for us to have someone from the left and someone from the right represent the film. And having these two media icons that are already in the limelight, kind of using that limelight to redirect it towards the film, was meaningful. Van, the author of the book, Mark Gerzon, Van had reached out to him to talk about bipartisan approach to climate change. And so Mark, mentioned to me, hey, like, Van is interested in working on solutions across the aisle. You should reach out to him and see if we can get them to watch the film. And he did, and he loved it. And then when we were thinking of people from the right, we thought it'd be great to also not just have a political opposite, but have a woman, so that we could balance having just all perspectives there. And Megan, she and Van go way back. He has a lot of respect for her father, and had her on the show that he had a couple years ago. And so he said, why don't you reach out to her? And when we did, she was like, I love Van. I love this film. And she had just had her child at the time. This was back in November,
Oh, wow.
December. And so she was starting to think about the world a little bit differently, and, what kind of world her child would grow up in, and trying to be a part of that solution. And so having the two of them on board has just taken things to another level and been a great experience.
So you have two big things coming up in the next couple of weeks, or soon, very soon. I guess the 12th, and then also the following, right? Too
Yep.
big. So tell us about it.
Yeah, so the reason we're releasing the film now, the Reunited States, which is just out on Amazon Prime for anybody who wants to watch it, is that there's two big events coming up this weekend. America Talks on June 12th and 13th. People can sign up at americatalks.us. It's basically a one-on-one conversation with your political opposite. And it's a massive initiative by the whole bridging community. It's been done in Europe, called My Country Talks, for years. But it's a way to get to know someone. There's a kind of you sign up for it, you're partnered with someone across the country, and then you have a one-on-one video chat like this with a prompt of questions on the side, and you can really get a chance to talk to someone that you might not have access to in your everyday life. And so American Talks is a huge event that's coming up, and that kicks off the National Week of Conversations, which is the second event that you're talking about. And National Week of Conversation is the whole bridging community. There's hundreds of organizations that are doing this work, trying to bring us closer together across the partisan divide or across different divides. That week is where everyone hosts events and invites the public to join as part of
Cool.
conversation or screenings. And that is also available on americatalks.us. You can see the calendar of events and sign up for something in your town or virtually. And so these are big milestones for the bridging community.
Awesome. So Ben, what's the biggest hope for the film? What do you want to happen?
You know, the film is really an entry point for a way of looking at these divides. And it's the idea is to frame the discussion differently and to say it's, you know, instead of pointing our finger over there and saying those people are the problem, it's to look within yourself and say, am I doing things that are fueling these divides? Is the way I'm thinking about someone or posting about a group of people online, is that putting further fuel on the fire? Because all we really have control over is ourselves. And so the goal of the film is really to give people a sense of agency instead of hopelessness, and say like there's nothing I can do, this is just what's happening, I need to fight this battle, to rather saying, wait a second, I have responsibility over my own thoughts, words, and actions, and I can choose to be a uniter or a divider, and that it's in all of our own best interest to do that. And if just that reframing of the problem happens, then it's been a huge success. But it's an emotional film. Like I think if you need a little bit of hope about where we are and see that there are people doing this work, I would say tune in, because we could all use a little hope these days.
Well, fabulous, Ben. We appreciate you coming by. So the movie's now available on Amazon Prime, right?
Yep.
And also other streaming places as well, correct?
Yeah, the Reunited States is available everywhere. It's on Prime for free, and it's on iTunes and all of the other platforms as well.
And best place to connect with you. Where can we go?
You can drop me a line at ben@reunitedstates.tv, or follow us on Instagram, send us a message there, at the Reunited States on Facebook. On Twitter, it's at @the_reunited.
And what you're doing, Ben, is you're bringing this awareness that's very important to finally get us back together again in ways. And by showing it in this film, you're going to do it, and through these events that are coming up the next couple of weeks. So we appreciate you coming by. Great work on this film for sure. And thanks for stopping by.
Thanks so much, Neil. I really appreciate it. And everyone, keep hope alive. There is a path forward together.
Yes, there is. And this is this was the Neil Haley Show. Our special guest, Ben Rekhi. Take care, guys.
Thanks.